Y'all join palms. For me, I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thank you all for being here. Nice to see you on a Saturday morning. Oh, can we open that one? Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Gets that huge cross breeze going, you know. Yeah. So good to see you all today. Thanks for showing up. What brings you all here on a Saturday morning? Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here? I see two hands there.
Trying something different.
Trying something different?
Yeah, new adventure, new year. Is this skydiving class?
I share this teaching a lot, but Chogyam Trungpa is a great Tibetan Buddhist teacher. And he says Buddhist practice is not quite skydiving. The example he gives is jumping off a really tall building. And he says, the bad news is you jumped. The good news is there's no ground to fall on. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're trying something new. Welcome.
Same thing. We live together.
So you dragged each other?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll do my best to make sure you say nice things on the way home to each other. Anyone else here for the first time? Yeah.
First time in person, but I've been doing virtually for almost 3 years.
3 years, I know, right?
Yeah, I was living up in Oregon, so.
Oh, right on. What's your name?
Graham.
Graham Willis.
Graham Willis on there?
Yeah.
It's the first time in person.
So how come you're not virtual today?
Oh, I am.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. You get a message. That's me.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So and up in Portland, I was part of the Inside
Yeah.
up there.
Beautiful.
Robert B. There, but, So
Are you living here now? Or you just?
Yeah. I moved back.
Oh,
here.
very cool.
Yeah.
You were here originally.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the Riverside
Okay.
area. Lived here for a few years before.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my first time here.
Yeah. So you're actually one of the people when I make my joke and say welcome to all the millions of YouTube followers. You're one of the ones that knows there's only like 15.
Yeah, right.
They don't know that because they can't see the number.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here, Graham.
I always pretended like it was millions. So.
Thanks. I appreciate you working with it. Yeah. Anybody else here for the first time? Yes.
My name is David. The question is what brings me?
Sure.
I grew up in Southeast Asia, so I had a lot of exposure. And then I started attending the recovery Dharma.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd learn a little more.
Beautiful. We're glad you're here. Yeah, it's funny when you say grew up like childhood, most of your life there.
Like childhood, like 9 years. In
Yeah.
Singapore and Thailand.
Okay, so a long enough time. What ages roughly?
I was like 3rd grade to high school.
Okay, yeah. So definitely a long enough time to really understand the heart of Buddhist culture, which is Thailand. And it's interesting because normally I talk about people who are here that are not familiar with being in and around that on a consistent basis. And The example I often give is that, well, now it's Ubers, but, growing up here in a taxi cab, you get in the taxi and there's a cross hanging on the dashboard, and that doesn't mean that the driver's doing everything that that Jesus said, right? You go over to Asian countries, say Taiwan or Thailand, where it is predominantly Buddhist, and the driver's got a Buddha hanging on the dashboard. But you know what that means? They're not doing everything the Buddha said. So but it's still really cool, I would imagine, to have grown up in and around that. And yeah, well, cool. Glad you're here. And how's the Recovery Dharma treating you?
It's different than the other programs. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing.
Sure. Yeah. Right on. Well, we're glad you're here. Anybody else want to play along while you're here this morning? Anyone else new? I scared you all out of raising your hands. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started with meditation practice. To our millions minus one followers on YouTube, thanks for joining us. Feel free to say good morning, introduce yourself. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. Type your name in if you want, and say hello. So meditation practice, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You will not have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten, shoulders relaxed, hands are on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on a bench or chair, also trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. If you need, it doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. So simply move, return to stillness. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, simply sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought. each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. Means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This is not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. Oh, can we leave that open, please? Thank you. Very often the present moment is uncomfortable, is difficult, is cold. And our immediate reaction is to fix and change and control everything outside of us. Hoping it was like this, hoping it was like that, wishing it was like this, wishing it was like that. This practice is learning to be with life as it is and adjusting your mind. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's all. We spend most of our lives running to something. Some craving, some addiction, some desire. Thinking that something outside of us will make life better, simpler, and more peaceful. Buddhist practice is like holding up a mirror and reflecting back on yourself. What do I think? What do I say? And what do I do? And how does that impact my life and the life of those around me? And truly, I find for many people, that's why it's so difficult. Because it actually puts the responsibility back on you. Or we've spent most of our lives trying to create a perfect little environment around us. Perfect place to live, perfect job, perfect amount of money, perfect vehicle, perfect person. We're always crafting this, some sort of story in our head. And nobody ever gets it. What we fail to realize is what you're actually living right now is the perfect story, because it's reality. And the sooner you embrace that, the easier your life becomes. And the struggle and fight and resistance against everything and everyone else begins to fall away. But this idea of if I only add this, if I only have that, if we only could go here, if we could only do this, we'll spend our entire lives doing that. And then we die. Have we ever learned to just appreciate and be with present moment? And have gratitude for all that you have? Because something tells me if you were able to get here on a Saturday morning, somehow you had means of transportation. My guess is most, if not all, the people in here had the ability to eat this morning. Most, if not all of you, have shelter. Most, if not all of you, have at least one person in your life that loves you and cares about you. Sounds pretty darn good to me. When will that be enough? So, with that, I'll pause with us. And I think we didn't check that button. So, unless the millions of people just have nothing to share today, I don't think you'll be able to comment. But since Graham's already here, he'll speak on behalf of all of you. So thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice. Yeah.
I just want to say that, I'm feeling gratitude for that meditation and for you being here doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing that.
I noticed something that I've noticed before when sitting, which is when I try to focus on my breathing, if I try to do that in a really targeted sort of way, it feels there's a struggle. And when I allow myself instead to just notice whatever I notice and notice that I'm noticing that and kind of skitter around on it, breathing becomes part of what I notice. But it's a more peaceful, relaxed kind of sit for me when I allow my mind to not just like wander aimlessly, but notice where it's going.
This is your first time here?
I was here once.
Long time ago. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how nice I'm going to be in my response. I'm nicer to newer people, but so I think that's wonderful. I mean, well, let me back up. Whatever I think about what you just shared is actually irrelevant, but I'm just saying that anyways. What I want to just throw out there as food for thought, not just for you, but for anybody else who might be newer. And also, have you been practicing a long time?
I have actually.
Yeah.
I practiced with Dave Smith up in Insight.
Oh, yeah.
He's in Colorado.
Yep. Yeah, I know Dave very well. I had a feeling that based on the way you said that you had to practice. Again, I just don't want to assume anything. So not just for you, but really for anybody, it's wonderful to notice. And you kind of said it quickly, you said to not just let it wander, but to notice it. So the question is, when we notice it, do we allow the noticing to just jump from notice to notice to notice to notice, or do we notice it and we work on releasing it and coming back to present moment? So yes, and if 100 people lead you, they'll lead you 100 different ways. And the truth is, none of us really know, right? We're all just sharing our own personal practice, our own experience, hopefully with as much humility as possible and freely as possible. But the reality is, noticing is wonderful, but then what? So if you go through your day, Jonathan, do you ever go, I don't know, I just saw you when I looked down. Do you ever notice a thought that's, say, angry during your day? Yeah, often. Oh, thanks. This will be even easier. Right? And when you notice that thought of anger, you notice it, right?
Sure.
Are you able to release it and just keep going? Or do you fixate on it for 20 minutes or 2 years?
Depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on where I'm at emotionally and how focused I am, and whether or not it could take days for me to get rid of it, or
Yeah.
a minute.
It could take days to a minute, depending upon how you are emotionally.
Yeah.
And that means you're probably human and in the same boat as every single person sitting in this room,
Yeah.
right? And so the practice of meditation, the noticing is important. But as we go through our day and as we notice anger, we want to be very careful that we don't fixate on that. And so for me, the meditation practice is actually training the mind to notice the thought, as the Buddha taught, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. I'm sure Dave has said these words a million times. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. These are the thoughts that we have throughout our day, as the Buddha taught. And the practice of meditation is to recognize pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and then come back to the present moment. Because all that thought is just a passing thought, like airplanes going over our heads. And so, yes, we don't want to force it, because that forcing it is also very rigid, which we definitely don't want to do. But I find it most beneficial in day-to-day life, because the practice of meditation, and again, this is for everybody, the practice of meditation isn't about being good at meditation. I mean, if you can sit there for 20 minutes and do nothing but count your breath for 20 minutes straight, what good is that if the moment you get up and walk outside, somebody says something, pisses you off, and next thing you know, you're throwing your coffee on them? Not that any of you would do that. But we have to learn, or I suggest we learn, how to bring this seated meditation practice into daily life. And it does start with noticing. Yeah.
Since you use me as a guinea pig.
Sure.
I have often found that focusing on the breath is not even kind of enough for me. So there's the noticing, but then there's also the active inquiry into where and what is happening and why it's happening in order to release it.
Yes. And again, so we're looking at really in those three examples, three very different approaches to meditation practice. And that's what makes this all beautiful. And most important is to find what practice resonates and sits with each individual the most. Because as I said earlier, Buddha taught some stuff 2,500 years ago. And ever since then, every person's been making up their own version of it. And none of us really know. If it helps you be kinder, if it helps you be gentler, if it helps you love and have more compassion towards yourself than others, then it's a beautiful practice. Being a Zen practitioner for myself, I'm always a big fan of sharing that when we just sit in silence and we attempt to just keep sensation, awareness on sensation of breath, and we lose that focus and we have difficulty sitting in silence, that's a really wonderful thing to become aware of. Because when we're left in silence, what are we stuck with? Ourselves. And what are we often trying to run away from? Ourselves. So that was funny. I thought you said that with you. Yeah. Ourselves. Why do you think that is?
We're
own worst enemies.
We're our own worst enemies. Isn't that sad? I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. You know, the cool thing about Buddhism is he says there is no self. So there's no self to love or hate, to like or dislike. There's no self to judge or critique. There's just physical form, consciousness, and a lifetime, as we call it, world of experiences. And if we can drop that harshness on ourselves, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough, I'm not kind enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not. Most of us have been doing that our whole lives. That's what leads many people to Buddhist practice, is that, you know, we destroy ourselves. Yeah. Questions, thoughts? Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about the Dalai Lama, like when that tradition started and what his role is.
Sure. So,
The Cliff Notes version.
man, I've been doing this a long time. Nobody's ever asked for like the biography of the Dalai Lama. I feel like I should have studied up on him this morning. So, oh, go ahead. What?
There's a documentary that just came out on
Joy?
Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I realized like, I don't know
Anything about him?
Yeah.
Watch the documentary. and then you can sit here next week and give a report. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, they only talk about him. Like, I know he was chosen as a child, but like, when did, there was someone before him? And
Yeah.
when did that start?
Oh, God, yeah, that's a great question. All right, so without, I just like to put a little asterisk there. I'm no historian, I'm no scholar, and I have not studied the entire life history of the Dalai Lama. But I can tell you a little bit about him from my, uneducated experience. The first thing is, one of the things I love the most about him, and this might sound silly, but you know what his name actually means? Dalai Lama. Anyone know what his name means? Ocean of wisdom. Yeah. Like that's like I'm done right there. Right? That's the name, Ocean of Wisdom. So where did he come from? Well, the cool thing is we actually have the original Dalai Lama right here in this room. That big statue in the middle, that is Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin's name means hearer of the world's cries. Kuan Yin hears all the suffering in the world and then pours out compassion to heal all who suffer. Different languages, Kuan Yin, Chinese, Chen Rezig, you'll hear in Tibetan, Avalokiteshvara, Kanon, Guan so it's Japanese, Vietnamese, again with my American accent. But so you'll hear Kuan Yin reference different languages spoken about differently. They say the Dalai Lama is the endless rebirth and continuation of the. When Buddhism started 500 years before Christ, 2,500 years ago, it stayed in India, went south maybe 100 years later, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, first couple of years. Turn of the century, it goes north, China, Japan, Korea, Northern Asia. About 1,000 years after he died, Buddhism makes its way into Tibet. And you have Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche. Anyone in here like really versed in Tibetan Buddhism? Because some of you could probably even speak to this more than I could. But you have Buddhism goes in about 1,000 years after he died into Tibet. And it adapts Tibetan culture, very loud, colorful, fun, stuff like that. So that's kind of the history of, in 30 seconds, how and when Buddhism went into Tibet. Now, the Dalai Lama, there's a whole, there's another movie too, but there's a whole history of Dalai Lamas that have been selected. And not just the Dalai Lama, like there's lots of lamas, and they are all chosen as what they consider the literal reincarnation of the prior Lama, a prior Lama. So this Dalai Lama, for example, the 14th, right, I believe, Dalai Lama, is not necessarily the literal reincarnation of the 13th. Just to clarify that for you. But there have been a whole history of Dalai Lamas. This one, I think, and again, don't quote me on anything really, but I think he's the reincarnation of the 9th Dalai Lama. I'm just totally making that up, but I think it's the 9th. And so they say that he is the reincarnation of a past Dalai Lama. And there's really trying to sum this up. There's a whole history of how they select the Dalai Lama. And they put them through tests as children. They'll lay out certain pairs of glasses, and the child will choose the previous Dalai Lama's glasses. They'll put out certain Dharma instruments, Tibetan bowls, whatever, all this stuff. And this child goes to every single one and knows certain bits of information. Because again, if you think about Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism in general, where there's a belief, as there was in India at the time, of rebirth and reincarnation, right? That was a trick question with some of us as we age. But how many of you remember what you had for breakfast this morning? You're already, some of you guys were like, no. I wasn't looking for no. Let's go with the people that remember, right? You remember what you had for breakfast this morning. So if I put out 3 things and say, what did you eat for breakfast? You would be able to tell me. So now imagine a fully enlightened being that could see all of their past lives. Them knowing what glasses they had 200 years ago is no different than us knowing what cereal we had this morning. It's a terrible example, but that's all I can do. So there's a whole selection process, which if you Googled stuff, YouTube stuff, there's so much info out there on how they do that. But he is considered the spiritual and religious leader of Tibet. And we don't talk politics, we don't talk religion, Dharma Bum Temple never have. But I will mention this briefly, that when China went in and did what they did in Tibet, and Dalai Lama had to leave and has lived in exile, I think it was 1949, he's still considered the religious and spiritual leader of this nation. And so his role, and that's where you get into seeing him as like this political figure as well. But if you drop all of that, or if you even view him from that, everything about his message is just covered in endless compassion for all sentient beings. That is all he wants. Endless compassion, love, kindness for all sentient beings. Do no harm. This is the message of the Dalai Lama. Do no harm. So there's 5 minutes worth of the Dalai Lama's. Yeah. It's also cool if you want to get into like really fascinating, because I think Joy, is it him and Desmond Tutu? Is that the, yeah. But he also said, and just to plant a little for those who are into this kind of stuff, he also has gone on record over the last few years of saying that, so the teaching in the Bodhisattva land of Buddhism is that you can actually choose how and where and when you're reborn. Okay, I know this might sound crazy to all of you, but when we're done here in a couple minutes, right, except for those of you who choose to stay around and help clean up and take out trash and do those kinds of things, the rest of you are going to choose to leave and go to your vehicle or walk or bike, however you got here. That choice is just as simple as it would be for a bodhisattva to choose where their rebirth is going to take place. Just like the breakfast. And so the Dalai Lama has gone on record over the last couple of years of saying he's the end, that he will not be reborn, because people from certain lands say they already have the next Dalai Lama. And he's saying, this is the end of the line, folks. So I'll just plant that seed for those of you who want to explore that. Yeah. Endless compassion, ocean of wisdom. And for those who are brand new to Buddhism, Buddhism is about wisdom and compassion. And you have the 2 wings. All wisdom, no compassion, you're going to struggle. All compassion, no wisdom, going to struggle. So it's finding the balance in your life. And part of this is recognizing, where do I lack compassion? Where do I lack wisdom? And not from this, like, I'm not worthy, judgment, critique, but just honest exploration of, this is where I'm greedy. This is where I'm angry. And this is where I'm ignorant. This is what the Buddha taught as the cause of our suffering, the 3 poisons: greed, anger, ignorance. So where in my life am I greedy? Where am I angry? And where am I ignoring reality? And where am I stuck in thinking that my view of reality is correct? Anyone in here think that your view of reality is correct? Only one. It's always so nice to sit with a room full of enlightened people. See what you've been missing online?
Way better.
Way better in person. Other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
Let's start with Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
I notice he's, every time I see him or hear him, he's always smiling, he's laughing. And I thought I heard something about at the Buddhist time that his monks were known for being smiling and laughing all the time. They were like called smart.
Yeah, well, there is actually like a monk in some of the sutras that they call like there's a smiling monk and things like that. But yeah, the Dalai Lama he's just and what has always fascinated me about that when you see him laughing and so playful. One of my favorite things about him, and some of you who saw him when he's been at UCSD and SDSU over the years, anyone ever seen him? A few of you. One of the things I love when he goes to college campuses is he always takes the hat. So he's sitting there like at San Diego State with the San Diego State baseball hat on, you know? And he'll be at like Texas and he's got the Longhorns hat on, you know? And so here's this like, and he's just this like cute, you know, monk, Tibetan monk. And he's got baseball hats on and he's always smiling and laughing. But what fascinates me about that is not to minimize the amount of pressure or responsibility any of us have, but are any of you the religious and spiritual leader of a nation? I mean, if you are, that'd be really cool. I'd like to know you, but right? And that's how he presents himself. Talk about pressure and responsibility, and that he can roam around and put on baseball hats and just tell people to be kind. He hasn't been able to enter his. Actually, I think did he recently go back? I'm not sure, but he can't even go home. You know, same thing with the Thich Nhat Hanh recently. You know, I mean, you can go back to Oregon. I'm glad you're here, but right. So here he is, not even allowed to be in his own homeland, and he just carries himself so beautifully and playfully. And I think in Buddhist practice, if you can't laugh, you're going to have a really hard time with this stuff. And when I say if you can't laugh, I don't mean it like, you know, a funny movie or whatever. I mean, at yourself. One of the most beautiful things I learned from people like that, you know, great teachers and things like that, is that they were able to find humor and laughter at their own ignorance, but then work to transform it. Right? It's one thing to be aware of like, you know, my anger, my ignorance, but then what do I do with that? We have to work on that. So, yeah. I'll do one more thoughts, questions before we wrap up. Oh, hi. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could give like a beginner's primary on the Eightfold Path.
Yes. So I'll close with this thought. The question of a beginner primary on the Eightfold Path. So when they called him the Buddha, and the very quick story, most of you probably know, but if you don't, it's not some god, wasn't some big belly dude living in the sky. He was a prince, 29 years old. He's grown up living in the base of the Himalayan mountains, sneaks out in the middle of the night with his buddy, and he sees what's called the four sights. He sees old age, sickness, death, and an ascetic, a very simple, wise, like monk or nun, yogi, and goes to his buddy and he says, what is all that? Old age, sickness, death? And they said, yes, my lord, it happens to all of us. Well, his father sheltered him because he wanted him to become a king. And it was said when he was born that he would either become a king, great ruler, or like a, an enlightened kind person. And his father's like, I want him to be a king. So they sheltered him. They didn't let him see old age, sickness, or death. Again, the very short story. So 29, he finally sneaks out, sees all these things, and his buddy Chana's like, yes, that happens to all of us. So he's like, well, how can I live with a world of wealth and riches when there's a world out there that's suffering? So he left, sneaks out in the middle of the night, roams the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. At 35 years old, he sits down under the Bodhi tree. You can see it in Bodh Gaya, India today. And he says, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer. And it's said, there's different versions of this story. Again, it happened a long time ago, and people aren't still around and they couldn't record it. It was all memorized for like 100 years anyways until they finally documented it. So it's a big game of telephone that eventually got written down. And so most will say he sat for 21 days under the Bodhi tree, and he, in essence, recognized cause of all suffering. And this is what started as the Four Noble Truths to the Eightfold Path. Might be hard to see where you're sitting, but above the exit door up there when you leave, there's a tapestry up there, and that's actually the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and the first 5 disciples that he taught. It's at Deer Park. It's called the first turning of the Dharma wheel, where he taught the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And many scholars, great Buddhist teachers that I've always learned from have said that all of the Buddhist teachings, everything, is in the Four Noble Truths, which includes the Eightfold Path. So there are 2,500 years of teachings and books and lineages and a bunch of people today telling you all the stuff we think, right? Google has everything you need to know on the front page, and it's free. And what you'll see there is the Four Noble Truths. The first one he said, and this is what he taught there, life is filled with dukkha. Dukkha is suffering. Dukkha's translation, suffering in English language, pretty poor translation, because suffering, at least in English, it sounds heavy, right? Traumatic, I'm suffering. But it's discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Do you like mayonnaise? Oh, bad example. What do you not like on a sandwich?
Celery.
Celery. They put celery on sandwiches?
Bad extra water.
Okay, great. No, I'm with you. I mean, I wouldn't like so you go to Delhi, I can't imagine saying hold the celery, but hold the celery. You get the sandwich, there's celery on it. You're unhappy. That's dukkha, right? It's not going to kill you unless you're allergic to celery, but that's our entire life. Every day. You watch today how many moments today of just little things that feel just not right to you. This is dukkha. And the Buddha said our life is filled with it. Then he said the second thing is, what's the cause? This is the second noble truth. The cause of suffering is greed, anger, ignorance. This is the 3 poisons. We overcome greed with compassion. We overcome greed with generosity. We overcome anger with compassion. We overcome ignorance with wisdom. We always want more. We're angry at how it's working, and we're ignoring truth, meaning we're stuck in our own mind because we think we're right. You two came together, right? And you're leaving together still, right? You ever get into an argument?
Yes.
When you get in an argument, do you think you're right?
Yes.
Do you think you're right? Amazing. You're both right. This is our lives. Once we stop to recognize that all we are is stuck in our own view, this is wisdom. You ever been in that argument and realized you're wrong, but then you still argue just to try to win the argument? I'm with you, man. I get it. Spent most of my life there. It's a lot of fun. So that's the wisdom, is to recognize I have my views, they have their views, right? So that's the second noble truth. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And the fourth noble truth, which is your question, is the path. What is that path that he taught? And the path, very specifically, is to have correct or right, depends on what translation you use, views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. And I say it jokingly but seriously about Google. The thing I love about Google is in the first 2 pages, you'll see 30 different versions of the Eightfold Path. They're all going to be pretty close. The challenge is not which one is right or wrong, which one's better or worse. The challenge is, can I do them? Right? What the Eightfold Path is really addressing is our karma. And the Buddha taught karma is what we give, not what we get. We generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. This is our karma. So our whole life is, what are we going to bring into our life today? What kind of thoughts are we going to bring? What kind of language and speech or text communication are we going to bring? And what kind of physical action are we going to bring? Right? If your view is based on selfishness, greed, me, then what thoughts, speech, and actions follow are going to stem from that. Make sense? But if our view is, hey, everyone else in this world is equally as important as I am, then the intention that we bring into our thoughts and speech and action will come from that place. And then that feeds into our livelihood, how we spend every day, right? The effort we put into it. And then how mindful and aware are we, and can we focus and concentrate on what we're doing? So does that give you a starting point?
Great start.
Yeah. And then it's like, uh-oh, now what? Then we just have to do it. So, all right, so we'll close with that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained be transferred to those who need it most. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few thoughts, announcements just before you head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 16 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our unenlightened views of Buddhist teachings and share it with those who show up. So we appreciate you showing up. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. We have a huge recovery sangha, so anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, life, whatever it might be, that meets a few times a week. We have a family sangha that meets once a month as well, so that's parents, kids, toddlers, and teens. That's third Saturday of the month, I believe it is right now. Website has everything. And also just returning, we just started Thursday, well, Thanksgiving we did it, but just started Thursday for the first time in almost 3 years was our food redistribution program. For the last 12, 13 years, we would gather, prepare food that would be wasted and thrown away. We meet downstairs, spend about 45 minutes making sandwiches, and then we head downtown and we feed people who sleep on the streets every night. So it's great to have that back. That's every Thursday, 5 o'clock. We're bringing it back slowly. So right now we are just going to do peanut butter, jelly, and bread. We're going to simplify things for a little bit, as Carla, we were talking about. So, and thank you, Carla, for being a great leader and really helping drive that over the years. We appreciate it. But it's a beautiful practice. And the thing about food redistribution program is the people on the streets, they will make it through the night whether they get our sandwich or not, most likely. So the practice is really for those of us who participate in it. And anytime you think your life sucks and you don't have enough, go feed people who sleep on the street every night. And it tends to put things into perspective. So Thursday, 5 o'clock, just show up. That's all. As I, slipped in there earlier today, there's a lot of people. Trash cans get full. Stuff needs to be swept, cleaned outside, things like that. There's a list by the door. So we don't have a cleaning crew. We are the cleaning crew. So anyone who wants to stick around and help take care of this space, we are the ones who do it. So downstairs, Buddha for You, Maggie's there if you need anything. The recovery Dharma books are down there as well. So if anyone needs those. So thanks all for being here, and be well.